Hello and welcome to another edition of the Barnsley StartUp MeetUp podcast. I'm Matt Roberts, your host as usual, and with me is Chris from Optimise Cyber Solutions, who will be doing the talk for the next event in October. It's all about cybersecurity, particularly for startups and founders, where you might be having your team or you might be working remotely, whether that's on customer sites or whether it's working from home, and the things that you need to be thinking about in order to stay secure and keep your business secure whilst working remotely. So rather than me go into any detail, Chris, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having us, Matt.
No problem at all. Do you want to give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you got into cyber training and cybersecurity in general?
Yes, not a problem at all. So, going back 20 years, started off in electronics. So electronics, cyber wasn't really a thing then, or as popular as it is now. Long story short, fast forward X amount of years, I ended up being fortunate and a privilege to work in the National Cyber Security Centre. So I was one of the UK's lead national cyber incident coordinators, where we managed some of the biggest cyber incidents that were happening in the UK. Having an impact on large companies, organisations, and especially government. So a fantastic opportunity and a great learning curve as well. So some fabulous work. Unfortunately, it's not always a happy feeling working in that job, particularly when looking around smaller businesses. When they inevitably get hit with a cyber attack, it would fall upon some incident handlers, and it would come to myself to coordinate that. And it's not always a happy ending where the companies necessarily can't recover. And it was always a passion of mine. I'm a person that likes to help people. I like to do my bit to try and support people the best I can. So I had this vision, and the vision was, how can I help these companies and how can I support them and prevent cyber incidents happening to them in the future? So it led me to the idea, and I looked at the analytics, looked at the probabilities and causes that was associated with the cyber incidents. And a lot of these incidents could have been prevented. And that's with simple awareness training. And I say simple awareness training, it's more effective awareness training. So looking at how can we effectively train our employees or staff members or individuals to prevent these cyber incidents from occurring. So that was a passion. And then we looked at how we could make that happen. And we looked at some of the methods that companies use at the minute. And there's lots of varying methods. There's e-learning type methods, etc. But I looked at it from a scientific background and said, how do people learn? So then we adopted and came up with the idea of Optimise Cyber Solutions, where we can look at how people learn and then develop cyber awareness training around that model. So effectively bringing them on.
Fantastic. There's so many questions that I've got, largely because during my research, as we were saying earlier, I always try and do a bit of background research on who I'm interviewing, and I couldn't find anything on you. And I'm assuming that is largely because of the background of the work that you've come from, like the job, the role that you've come from. Is there anything from doing that role that still impacts your day-to-day life these days?
I think for me, my social presence, that's something I give talks about. We put everything online these days, so everything about us we try and use, and particularly for businesses and small businesses, we'd like to put ourselves out there and say, look at us, look at what we can do, and here's the background on me. Unfortunately, from a cybersecurity perspective, that can also open up doors, and we can go into that, and I could speak for hours upon that. So you've got to be very careful the way our presence is presented online. And the information that we give across. Yeah. The more information you give across is the more information can be used for cyber incidents. So when I do go into organisations and companies and I run a vulnerability assessment or an audit on them, the first thing I do is I look at the people. I look at the people and look at the businesses. In fact, some of the training that I do, normal introductions on a course, when you sit on a course, we introduce ourselves. Everybody sits there thinking, what am I going to say? What do I say? And you don't really listen to the other people in the room. So what I do as a great startup is I'll get people at the side of each other to introduce each other by giving them probably 10, 15 minutes of just searching online. And it's amazing what information you can find about people, yes.
That's really cool. I like that. Yeah. I always like, just to kind of divert a little bit, but I always like to ask people, especially when they're in a kind of training or in a public speaking role, do you have any icebreakers? Do you have any tools, tricks, tips for how to kind of go about getting everyone warmed up to the event, right? So, you know, I've said this before, but I do a bunch of, I've tried a bunch of different things for the Startup Meetup,
yes.
especially when you've got larger numbers, because, you know, people are still always a little bit nervous about networking, and they're always a little bit kind of, sometimes a little bit reserved. So just getting them into that kind of, you've got to go and speak to this person and have a dialogue. That's really interesting. It's like a really interesting opportunity. How again about that? What's the most scandalous thing that someone's found out about another person by virtue of doing that?
Good question. It's amazing. I think it's the shock factor of the amount of detail, telling things like looking at people's social media, looking at people's LinkedIn, and from that, a person, I'll not mention no names or company, could tell when they were going on holiday next, where they lived, the systems and services that they worked on in work, the server types that they worked on. From that, they were able to gain their email address, and then from that, they were able to gain leaked passwords. Wow. So they knew their leaked passwords, their names and addresses, what servers and what systems they worked upon, and also when they were going on holiday, which is crazy. That was literally a 15-minute introduction and a quick few tools, open source tools, no crazy cyber geeky hacking material, open source material, and we're able to establish all that information in just 10-15 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
It's scary what we put online.
It's
scary what we put online.
Yeah. I just, in terms of like the way that you can kind of infer, like so I guess with cybersecurity and with personal information that's available online,
yes,
there's two different types, aren't there? There's the type of information that is explicit, and it is your name, your date of birth, like, you know, it's the hard data, hard facts and things like that, right? Whereas there's also information that you can infer, isn't there, right? So there's like the sort of by virtue of something not being there, or by virtue of this information being held in this location, you can then kind of infer that, this is something that might be happening. I remember pretty recently, actually, a couple of weeks ago, there was someone putting some information or suggesting that maybe the American government was about to sort of do something pretty major, just simply because all of the pizza shops around the Pentagon had suddenly gone up to like a 2-hour wait for pizzas and things like that. And so they'd assumed that actually that's because people are working late and they've ordered a bunch of food in. Yes. And so therefore all of these pizza places couldn't service anyone else, right?
Sure.
And I just find it really fascinating, all of that sort of detective work with very little requirement for effort.
No skill, no effort.
Yeah.
Just perseverance, and once you learn and find your way, it kind of flows and navigates through. For example, if I wanted to do some reconnaissance on a company, people in cybersecurity, people are the weakest link. So people are the highest vulnerability. And a lot of organisations, they like to spend money on cybersecurity, and when they spend it, they think about the shiny boxes, the bits of kit, the flashy lights, the technology part. But there's the people in the process. And organisations, with people being the weakest link, it's the easiest way to target. We don't need to think about complicated attack methods or attack vectors attacking certain bits of technology. For example, if you think of a secure room, we can have the best locks on the windows, the best doors, the best mechanisms, the best intruder detection systems. But if someone's going to give you the password and the key to the door and leave it open, you're only as strong as your biggest vulnerability. It's
that classic one of leaving your password on the monitor on a post-it note, right?
Yes, yeah. And that's what, going back to the social media element, people advertise everything, but if I'm looking to find the vulnerability of an organisation or doing a pen testing effort, I can look at the organisation, for example, look on LinkedIn. From LinkedIn, I can see then what people work, because I like to showcase and say I work for this company. From that, then you can understand, we talked about beforehand, someone might be a Windows server specialist. That gives me the insight then that company's using Windows because they've employed that organisation. And it follows a natural trail until you find a vulnerability. And then once you've found a vulnerability, there are many ways which can be exploited. But then I see it's my job to teach people and train people to be able to defend against that and protect themselves and protect their organisation.
So one of my questions was going to be, what led you to kind of go into training specifically as a method for helping businesses become more secure? And I think you've probably already just answered that with your initial bit of intro as well. Is largely I assume that. Because another one of my questions was going to be, what are the most common flaws? What are the most common reasons for companies to be open to cyber attacks and the like? And I guess it's people, isn't it? Right.
It's all about the people.
And that's. Do you want to just go? Can you go into any detail about like specific incidents that you came across, or is it more a kind of general? These are the sorts of social engineering.
So what I can say is that the way that we work in the UK, the way that we grade cyber attacks, it's on a threshold level, threshold matrix. My passion comes from helping and supporting smaller businesses, small to medium enterprises. And the reason for that is if you don't meet that threshold test, if it's not an impacting government official, large organisations having an impact on UK Gov PLC as such, then you're on your own. You're on your own as a business. And I've had many a difficult conversation with business owners and directors, managing directors, that simply ring up in desperation and report we're a victim of a cyber incident here. And yes, the NCSC do a fantastic job. They offer advice and guidance and direction, but they're not there to solve everyone's cyber incidents. And I could see just by having some preventative measures in place that these could have been prevented. Yeah. And there's a statistic that it's over 65% of small businesses that get hit with a cyber attack will fail. Yeah. And that is significant.
Terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah. And a little bit of investment in their people. As you say, it's that awareness, understanding, so business owners understanding it doesn't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to be shiny boxes and lots of change in infrastructure. Small implementations could actually fix your biggest weakness.
Well, so that was going to be another question is, how, are there, if you were talking to someone and they didn't know kind of what their current risk was and all of that sort of stuff, what are there some immediate things that they can do kind of off the bat that would immediately make them more secure?
Yeah. Well, I always say doing something is better than doing nothing. So anything that is working towards becoming more cyber compliant is better. Now, I recommend, and this is not a plug, but I would go into an organisation and do that vulnerability for them. It's hard to know what to look for if you don't know what you're looking for, and it can be quite scary and daunting. There is some great advice on websites. The NCSC provide lots of guidance and governance for startup organisations and businesses, etc., that give you some kind of basic tools, basic guidance and a handrail. However, every business is different, every organisation is different, and people haven't got the time. And I'm finding that people haven't had the time, and as the businesses have grown, they've not necessarily fetched their cyber maturity up to that level of where it needs to be.
It's one of those things that is an unknown cost, isn't it? It's it's an unquantifiable cost on the business as opposed to a preventative.
Yes.
Preventing a huge cost later on down the line.
Exactly. Right? And I always liken it to people that don't understand IT and people that don't understand cyber. I class it, cyber awareness training it's like servicing a car. Yeah. When finances become tight, the first thing you do is cut back on the things that you think you need to do. And servicing a car is one of those things that, it doesn't matter this year, it'll be okay, the car's running fine, we don't have a problem. Yeah. It's not until later down the line something breaks, and it's actually more costly than what it would have been to implement that throughout the time. So it's very similar in the kind of industry that we work with. Yeah. It's preventative. And I think my awareness and what I try to get through to businesses is it's not expensive, and it's not that technical to implement those people skills, those soft skills that can do, which are your biggest impact and your biggest risks. Yeah. So train your people and the organisation, it's a culture. The culture then will develop and the security will come with that.
Good stuff. You mentioned in your introduction that you started out in electronics.
Yes.
What was Did you ever get involved in hardware attacks? Mechanisms for, super cooling a CPU so that you could kind of inject some code just before it properly boots up and things like that?
Me personally, I've never done any attacks. I'm the opposite. So I've seen firsthand the impact of some of the attacks that's happened. And I think a great one for people to look at is Stuxnet. I don't know if you're aware of Stuxnet.
Right, okay, yeah.
So Stuxnet is a fantastic one for the listeners to just have a Google and look at the complexities of how Stuxnet worked. We could talk for hours upon Stuxnet, but it's very, very, very complicated, but very simple.
Right.
So the output was extremely, extremely complicated, but the inject was so simple and so effective.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely encourage people to have a look at Stuxnet.
Yeah, got you. Awesome. So there's a question that I always have to ask as part of this podcast, and it's become a bit psychological as well. I quite like the answers that people give. It's a standard out of question for everyone, and that is, what's your ultimate sandwich, Chris?
Gosh, ultimate sandwich for me has to be a club sandwich without tomato.
Oh right, really?
Yes. Yeah, club sandwich without tomato. I think it's filling. It's enough for a meal. You don't feel like you need anything after it. It's got a mixture of texture and tomato. I like anything tomato based apart from tomatoes themselves.
Oh really?
Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
One of those strange ones.
Nice. So take me through it. So what kind of bread?
Ooh, toasted wholemeal bread.
Right. Yeah. And it's a double decker, isn't it? As a club sandwich.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
With bacon, lettuce, mayonnaise, and chicken. Sometimes maybe a little bit of grated cheese if I'm feeling a little naughty.
Oh, right.
So, making me hungry now.
Pushing the boat
yes.
off. Well, we are getting close to lunchtime.
For sure.
We are getting close to lunchtime. So, are you based in Barnsley, Chris?
Yes, so we have just partnered with CSL, Copy Systems Limited,
right, okay.
Over in Darton. It's fantastic. So all set up now, working in partnership. So they are delivering print solutions and looking to implement that cyber piece into their solutions. Okay. We had a discussion, nice. We've come together, and we work really well together. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome. So what's next for Chris? What are you up to after, of course, the startup meetup and things like that?
So I think really it's getting out to businesses, particularly in South Yorkshire. I like to support local businesses and working with them to implement their cybersecurity practices, understand their awareness levels, just make them safe, just make them aware, bring them up to times and get through to them that actually it's not too difficult, that we can help. And that there is more than your standard e-learning compliance tick. It has its place, but we do something a little bit different, a little bit above and beyond, and it's all people focused.
Fantastic. Awesome.
I think something worth note, whether it's worth sharing with listeners as well, is that we've just been approved by Skillsbank.
Yes, so, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, fantastic. So with Skillsbank, South Yorkshire Mail Combined Authority, we've been an approved provider.
Lovely.
So, which means that businesses can get funding, if successful, up to 70%. So upskilling their people.
Which is huge, right?
Fantastic.
It's a really, not just for yourself, but also for other smaller businesses where cost is a factor, let's be honest, it's always a factor, isn't it? But where that might be out of reach, but you're concerned about your security, cybersecurity, then, it gives smaller businesses a much needed hand up and leg up to be able to make sure that they are keeping themselves secure online. Fantastic.
Definitely. And our training as well, we've managed to get it accredited as well, so they will receive a recognised qualification at the end of it, which is all about upskilling. I know when I was going through my journey, you do training courses, and I think it's key to get that recognition back, to say, actually, look, I've done this, and feel proud of it.
Not just for the business, but also for the individual, right?
Yes.
It's something that's transferable. It's something that means that you're aware and that you understand what your responsibilities are as an individual and as an employee around making sure that the business has it stays as secure as possible. Right?
Exactly that.
Fantastic. Lovely. Thank you very much, Chris.
No,
it's been a pleasure having you on. So that's it for this edition of the Barnsley StartUp MeetUp podcast. The next event is going to be on the 10th of October, where Chris is going to be giving loads of really valuable information about how startups can stay secure online when they're working remotely or where they're working from home. The event is every second Thursday of the month, and keep posted for November's edition is going to be a good one as well. So thank you very much.